Transit for us is a real useful tool. It's another tool for us to understand cities, particularly how they operate and how they're built form, and the integration of urbanism and architecture. It was introduced in Sunday night, some of you that may be the first time, and it will certainly come up again through this process as it will be tied to our code that we'll produce at the end of the semester. But just we wanted to come up with this portrait just to give you a sense of what we're thinking about when we see these neighborhoods and how we analyze the city. Maybe difficult to see, but here's just a diagram of what the transect is. And very briefly, broken up into 7 zones, working from T1, transect zone 1, the most natural, to T2, which is rural and agricultural land, T3, suburban, I should say, more suburban. T4, general urban, T5, urban center, T6, urban core, and then D, special district. And the whole idea behind it, and just to recap from Sunday, is that as you move from the most natural to the most urban, you increase in diversity and density of building types. And so all of these zones presume a mix of uses in a walkable environment. So that's, for example, why certain places you'll see on the map that are white without any color, those areas do not fit in the transect as we understand it. So just to briefly, the dark green is a T1, the lighter green is T2, the suburban is this color here, as it steps up in tone in T4, and T5 is here, and the blue is the special district. So that the special district encompasses a lot of the institutions in the community, is Smith, the high school, the Cohen Hospital, the industrial park, and several other, the fairgrounds, the VA hospital, for example, are sort of large institutions. So this just helps us get a sense of, we look at how the density around, get a sense of how the block structures work in the historic core, and how the community is sort of naturally built out, just to help, just as a guide to help us understand.
So the diagram for us is actually a pretty good starting point, because this is overlaid over the existing city as it stands currently. What we'll do is, in the future, is take this diagram and see, look at some of the other areas that are in white and see if there's any way to incorporate some sort of transect zoning to that, to make those areas more traditional, more pedestrian friendly, all the traditional type of stuff that we talked about. So the white areas have actually kind of helped us hone in on certain project areas that we take a look at. And also it's also helped to try to figure out, when we're looking at the overall areas, to see overall areas to grow. You can see that some of the T4 areas, the blocks are actually smaller. They have higher density housing on there, but the blocks physically are smaller than, say, the blocks in T3. And what that means is that there's more streets, there's a better network, and hierarchy of streets in there. So this is a very good diagram for us to take a look at first initially, and then to start in the future to look at how transect zones and the traditional planning can affect certain areas around King Street and down in this neighborhood and things like that. So it's very helpful to try to figure out where the centers are in the cities as well. So.
And just to recap, it's a descriptive, not a prescriptive diagram. Members are going to speak to how they analyze the transit.
Could you just do a little orientation of
Sure.
King, left?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Very helpful. Yeah. No, for sure. So it's oriented north. You've got King Street, 66. Or this way. Pleasant Street's coming in. Here's Elm. Coming in through here. So this is Florence, Leeds, and Bay State.
And King Street is outside the transit.
Yeah, the Upper King, and as it exists right now, it does not meet the criteria of a traditional community.
I'm Crystal Cohen. And I'm Notre. So today we took a trip down to the Historical Society and dug up their old trolley maps, just to take a look at what the trolley lines used to look like before they were dug up in the 1930s.
see how the network.
We're kind of like how we're looking at the rest of the city to see historically what it did so that we can follow in its footsteps for a more sustainable and more holistic future. We wanted to look at the trolley lines too because, you know, these routes were planned out for a reason, and it looks like a pretty extensive network that worked really well together. And so it seems to make more sense to look at what historically was there than to try and reinvent the wheel for any transit system.
And then the next thing I wanted to do was start looking at the network of open space and bike and pedestrian trails throughout the area as well. And so this is just existing for the most part. And we also wanted to, we included schools because we found, of course, the schools around public land, and it's kind of part of the network. We want to make sure that the bikes access the schools as well. So this is just a diagram of what exists as of right now. And a lot of the bike paths are shown on some rather large roads, so I'm sure people probably do ride their bikes. We're not quite sure yet. We need to do a little bit more investigation to see if there are actual designated bike paths or if they're just along with the traffic. And I'm sure that in the final plan there will be different street types, and on some streets the bikes will just be in the traffic on smaller, slower, more residential neighborhood streets. And then on some of the larger streets there may actually be a designated lane. But it's just kind of fascinating to see the network of all the different bike paths. And I think eventually we'd like to get most of the streets in the city included as well, so that the bikes are actually become a larger part of just the culture of the community. So,
yeah, one thing too that's interesting is when these bike paths aren't following streets, they're following old trolley and rail lines, which a lot of people probably know. There's a group called Rails to Trails, which probably have a lot to do with that. But so you get kind of a similar network as to what you saw with the transit system, but just for bikes. And so maybe there's some way of integrating both of those even more into the city to do amazing things.
sorry, one more thing. Another thing that we also noticed was that there's a lot of large there's very large parks and lots of conservation area, which is really great. But one of the components that seems to be kind of missing are the smaller neighborhood parks and pocket parks. So I think that as our plans develop, hopefully we'll be able to try to incorporate more of those types of parks that can be used for more localized neighborhood uses and children and dogs and whatnot. So try to incorporate especially just more smaller parks and areas where we can find space for them.
Have you just noticed that on smooth, like bigger bike trails, the tree roots keep growing up underneath them? And I wonder what would be a long-term plan for actually making that sustainable for bike tourism?
That's a really good question.
And also, how do you reconcile that with the fact that we've undone some trail lines that we might want to use in the future to make bike paths?
I think part of that will be including the bikes on the roads, because often, even where the trolley used to run, there's a parallel road to it, so maybe the bikes could be on roads that kind of run along in those areas. We were also thinking it could be really cool, if they are just buses or just trolleys, if the right-of-way is wide enough, there may be room in areas to accommodate both within that right-of-way, which might be kind of interesting. It's kind of like a sustainable kind of spine that runs through.
We'll have to take a closer look at that and draw some sections and see how those things might work out. But
a lot more to come.
There's a group, the nonprofit based in Colorado, or California, Reconnect America, that's the whole premise is advocacy of not necessarily tearing out the rails to preserve the tracks for transit when it comes around again. And they have some data sort of how to evaluate whether a trail's worth taking down the tracks or not. It's no mean revisit. We're just starting to get into these things, but
there's a lot to work on.
And the other thing too that we'll have to look at, especially with the transit, is as they found in Portland, as they instituted the trolley lanes there, the development pattern, putting a trolley in really changes the development patterns, because it tends to go, people see the tracks in the street and they follow the tracks. street. So what happens is you end up having ribbon, it's called ribbon development, and that's when you have small retail and things start to kind of pop up on those tracks. So we'll have to be a little bit mindful of that in where we're running these, especially through some of the neighborhoods, to think about whether or not that type of development might be appropriate there or not. So that it's just going to take a lot of thinking, but we haven't had time to get there yet.
But it's really interesting to think about something like trolleys and rail networks as opposed to bikes, because they become a permanent infrastructure of the city, and so they do change the city in a different way than just bus routes do, because bus routes are so malleable. So it's a different kind of thing.
I'd love to see trolleys run again, but they have to be an expensive investment.
Right, right. And we're not saying that these would be, we're not saying put all these in tomorrow. Again, like all of these plans that we're developing, we're just taking a look at how, if it's possible to reintegrate them with the city, if there were funding somewhere along down the road, and to see what that would look like. And even if they weren't trolley lines, if there was some sort of bus route that was more affordable in the short term.
I mean, in the long term, though, what is the cost?
You know, I'm not sure, but we can look up the numbers. A couple of us have looked at this kind of thing in the past. So.
A lot of it depends on what kind of track you lay. If there's a track that doesn't require as much structure, that you can lay just in a regular street bed. So if you do it that way, I think it's cheaper. I think that's what Portland ended up doing. But the thing about trolleys and transit like that, I think part of it depends on population. But I know that there is federal money for some of those projects. It's the way they're getting them partially funded, at least in other places. So it'll probably be a combination of funding sources, I'm sure, that would eventually come together. But I don't know the exact cost, although I think we can find that. We'll find
Well,
that out.
if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the municipal trolley lines that ran, for between the 1880s and 1920s, I don't know exactly when it started, but a lot of them were private enterprises. And so, public transit is something that has been publicly funded for quite some time, but it seems like there's maybe a number of ways that could be done. I mean, if it became profitable, right?
Sure.
Then somebody would have an incentive to do it. But yeah, we're not proposing policy.
It seems like a trolley line would be a very good idea to say in the development of the North King area. That would bring people out and change the whole entire space.
Yeah, in fact, it did used to go up, it did used to go up to North King, almost to the end of the so that's pretty amazing.
Well, if nothing else, even just getting a loop that might run. Initially, if you could get one that ran kind of a commuter line and then a loop of some sort. It might
So this
be
here
a good way to start it.
there's Pleasant Street down here, and then it's King Street. So, and this is North King area. This is Hampton House right here. So it did used to come out here. It's something we could look at.
Are you also looking at connections to Amherst and to, between the 5 colleges and that?
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much we can do, but I did find a great map as well that we'll probably show you in the PowerPoint tomorrow of all of Massachusetts in around 1920 and all of the rail lines that connected the entire state. And it's pretty amazing. I mean, you could theoretically take rail from Northampton all the way to Boston, and you'd have a little bit of weaving to do, but it's a pretty amazing and extensive network. So.
Well, the regional, the brown line is the regional train, and the regional trains would connect some of the larger towns together. So the idea would be that the trolley, there would kind of be a hierarchy. There'd be a longer distance one and then localized trolleys.
What in general are the relative advantages and disadvantages of trolleys versus buses?
The thing about trolleys is that, because a trolley is a permanent thing, and you can get trolleys they usually have their own right of way, so they can be in traffic as well, but they're a more regularized time system. So when it's more regular, people know when to expect it. They'll be more use it because they just hop on, hop off, and it just becomes more convenient.
So you're saying that because the trolley has permanent rails, that creates a right of way, so that makes it more reliable. What if there were a right of way, permanent right of way for buses, but then there was no expense of putting down rails?
And that can work as well. The one thing about using buses instead of trolley is that, I mean, the difference development-wise is that trolleys affect development, buses don't affect development. Because trolleys are permanent, it creates a value of land adjacent to the trolley paths, whereas buses are not permanent. The bus route is not as permanent as a trolley route because you don't have to lane things
But
around.
isn't that a matter of law?
It depends. There's
There's
no, I
physicality of it.
should just step back and say that when we're looking at this today, we're looking at historical patterns that we haven't yet, certainly not gotten into the depth
Yeah, we're not
analysis
transportation experts, right?
to propose a plan yet. We are aware of systems like Antigua in Brazil that has dedicated bus lanes, or Pittsburgh, for example, where it has almost the form and function of a light rail system where you have dedicated lanes and actual physical stations with electronic systems. And the nice thing about that is that it helps develop a culture of transit, after which point, at that point we have ridership levels and population density levels to reach a threshold, after which point they can go to fixed rail. Pittsburgh's actually really happy with their fixed bus lanes because you have the dedicated lanes that act as light rail on those. And then once you get out of that viaduct, it then can reach the neighborhoods as a bus would, so you have sort of the best of both worlds there.
Do these run on catenaries or are they?
In Pittsburgh?
Yeah.
No, they're clean fuel buses. But it's just one of many examples. I mean, as far as getting the numbers, if we know what the numbers are, we haven't run them yet for Northampton, so it's really not.
Are trolleys considered like eco-friendly form of transportation?
Yes, they can run on, well, they're cleaner because they don't have exhaust. They run, my understanding is they're electric, so they run, a lot of times they have the wires above, sometimes in the tracks. But they're electric, so you don't have a lot of side effects. They still use energy, of course, but you just don't have,
I mean, it depends on what you compare them to. If you compare them to a bike is more eco-friendly.
right.
If you compare them to a car, then, it's a lot more eco-friendly to have a transit system than to have everybody in their own vehicles.
And that you can get so many people on them too. And that's another thing that would differentiate between buses and trolleys, is the trolleys would actually, because you can link cars up at each stop, you can pick up more people. So there's kind of a threshold there, really. I mean, but initially buses would probably be a much better way to go. And even just as a transition, we may never get to trolleys, but this was mainly just a study of the routes and how it all connected and worked. And it seems like if you made this the route today, it would work pretty well. So it was pretty exciting.
Also, I mean, trolleys are way more aesthetically pleasing than buses, and they don't run over as many bicyclists. With their exhaust.
There's also a certain psychology to seeing the permanence of the rails in the street, and I think there's something about that affects people, and there's for me anyway, and I've heard this from a number of different people. I mean, if you see the rail lines in the street or you see the electrical lines above, you maybe feel more secure about your transit being there for you than not being able to see the bus or.
Well, also, like, I've been on the cable cars in San Francisco, and I feel that they're a lot more fun to ride than buses.
Oh, they're great, yeah.
I'm coming late to the party here, but it occurs to me that something that we should show, just in terms of something that's both local and regional, right, is that we should show the 5 college
take another look at some of the diagrams, some of the plans that we've come up with for the last 3 days. I'm not sure how many people have been here for all 3 of the days, the last 3 nights, over the course of which we presented a number of different schemes. And I also, I'm hoping that before we leave town, we can get some very specific direction from people here about some of the more specific things about the forms that were, the actual location of buildings and the location of blocks, and some what we're proposing for some of the places like Florence and downtown, 13th Street, Pleasant Street. So people would like to take a look.
Yeah, well, let me just, on the subject of the transect-based zoning and this drawing, let me maybe explain one thing that may or may not be clear, or anticipate something that we hope to have tomorrow evening, which is this is a drawing that shows what it would look like if the existing conditions in Northampton were being described by the transect zones. Okay, so in other words, the things in the colors are part of the transect, part of the world's urban transect, and the things in white are not. Which means the things in white are essentially post-1945 development. Right? That's what that diagram represents. Existing conditions in Northampton today, described in terms of the zones of the transect, or by the absence of color, by their being outside of the transect. There's this description of an environment that is walkable, mixed use in character. The drawing that we hope that we'll have a preliminary drawing tomorrow that suggests what Northampton would look like if all of Northampton were to adopt a transect-based code. And so, part of the implication of that is showing, what colors all that white would be. And obviously, if, for example, to the areas to the southwest that are in white that are outside the transect zone, to assign a transect zone to them implies that future development in that zone would take place in accordance with the transect-based code. It doesn't mean that the things that are there would go away immediately or would be somehow forbidden, but it just means that any future development would be governed by that kind of zoning. So we hope to get to that by tomorrow. If we don't, we'll certainly be getting to it over the course of the semester. But I just wanted to add that this is really a drawing that shows existing conditions, and it will be accompanied by a drawing that's at least a tentative suggestion as to what future conditions could be.
As you develop that drawing, can you give us some idea of the fundamental criteria that you apply?
Have you been to any of the previous meetings where we discussed cold? You're here at cold.
That's it.
Yeah, you know what? I think that that may come up or may become a little bit clearer in the course of the student, any questions or presentation, review presentation of the work that's on the wall here. But essentially, the transect zones in the urban transect go from lowest to highest density. And the zones are defined not according to use. The assumption is that each zone has a mix of uses. So it's not zone business, commercial, residential. It's zoned according to density, lowest, medium, high density, compared to high density, and according to building type. And so, just off the top of my head, we would suggest, at least on the basis of what we've shown in the drawing here, that King Street would become a medium to high density zone in transit. At the same time, we're presuming that
how many people were here the night before? Okay, and the night before that? Okay, great. So, all right, so for a lot of you, this will be the first time looking at some of these plans here, which we presented over the course of those 3 nights. The plans are a little bit small at the moment. I mean, we're going to have them in larger scale eventually, and we're going to have them at a much larger scale tomorrow night with PowerPoint. But if anyone is having trouble seeing these, I would encourage you to maybe sort of gather around a little bit on the side here if you'd like to. Let me just sort of present briefly, via a recap for some people, what we have in mind for certain areas that we've already looked at this week, which we've also been refining over the last couple of days. We have 3 schemes here for downtown Northampton. We have 3 schemes for downtown Florence, or the center of Florence, I should say. We have 1 scheme here for Hospital Hill, 1 scheme here, and another one that is currently, I think, in progress for King Street, and another area here for Pleasant Street. And the system that we've arrived at over the last week or so for representing what we're doing here is that we have, it's everything that we're doing so at the moment is in plan rather than showing details of buildings or perspective views or elevations. But we're showing existing building footprints in black or gray, and we're showing proposed infill buildings in brown. And of course, one of the things that we've been talking a lot about over the last week, and as far as the discussions about sustainability and the Sustainable Northampton Plan, has been the idea of densification or infill in order to preserve natural areas that are outlying and to create neighborhoods that are mixed use and walkable and that don't depend on cars. So let me talk briefly maybe about downtown. I think a lot of those principles you'll see are the same principles that we're using in different areas, and then if people could give some comments and maybe take a closer look and see whether they think that the sorts of things and the amount of density and the location that we're proposing to put building either makes sense or doesn't make sense, and then we'll have something to go on over the course of the semester. Yes?
What about those 2 downtown Northampton?
Mm-hmm.
I guess, what's it? You can tell black and brown that, but what about orange?
Oh yeah, great. Orange is, well, let me say first, green is planted open space. Orange is open public space that is paved in some way, which that means that it's suitable for different kinds of uses, like, for example, farmers markets or the Taste of Northampton or other festivals, outdoor markets of that sort. So we like to have a little bit of both. So what we're proposing here, and I hope you can see, Northampton Main Street is pretty dense, and in fact we have no desire to make it any denser than it is now. We think that there's plenty of development here, and there are almost no gaps, although there are a few places where there are 1-story buildings that used to be 3 or 4 stories, and ultimately I think it would be really great if those would be filled up so that those could, like the other buildings on Main Street, have some sort of residential or commercial or office use above the retail on the ground floor. But then what we notice, and this is the case in a lot of places, that sort of behind the Main Street, but still within walking distance of Main Street, there are a lot of parking lots and a lot of paved land that is not built. And so what we're proposing in both of these, actually all of these schemes for downtown, is that we could incorporate new buildings into some of those gaps that would be similar in terms of the types of use allowed as the buildings on Main Street, which is to say that they wouldn't be zoned to exclude uses, or they wouldn't be zoned to only have 1 use, but like the buildings on Main Street, they would have the option to have retail on the ground floor and any combination of office and residential on the upper floors, such as the market demanded or such as people thought was desirable. So places like Masonic Street, where there's currently a big parking lot behind there, we've shown a pretty generous sized building that would be maybe the equivalent of 3 shop fronts on Main Street that could fit there. And then here on Strong Avenue, across from where the new infill project there, behind East Side Grill, that's another really large parking lot that we think could also fit maybe 4 or 5 shop fronts with residential and office above. And so as you're looking at these plans, that's what you want to be looking for, is sort of where we place those buildings. We're doing the same thing in downtown Florence. For example, at the intersection of Main Street and Maple Street, the mobile station, the mobile gas station that just closed down, we think that that would be a great place potentially to put that kind of building across from where Bird's store is. Now, of course, one of the trade-offs here we realize is that parking lots are not serving no function. They're providing places for cars to park, which is important downtown. Although we've also, speaking to people and just from our own observation, noticed that the parking garage here routinely has several hundred spaces that are unoccupied. So we wonder if the sort of squeeze for parking is as dire as it's sometimes perceived to be. But in any case, one option in any of these scenarios, or as a general thing, is to try to incorporate structured parking in one way or another. So for a number of these schemes, we've sort of imagined where another parking garage might go if that were deemed to be necessary. So I would say take a look at some of these and just love to get some feedback as to whether those sorts of ideas you think would make sense in Northampton as possible directions to go. And actually, I think that any response should be, I'd like to get some more people up here, I think, to answer and field some questions. So, yes.
I agree that parking garages would be better than a bunch of parking lots. Because you avoid one small plot plan and you get a ton of cars in there instead of having to rush for that.
Please repeat the question.
It was a comment that that he likes the idea of having parking garages as a general principle rather than parking lots as a more efficient use of space. Is that, did I interpret that correctly?
Yes.
Great. Yes.
Are there any precedents elsewhere for parking structures? Because what you're suggesting is that people are driving around and around looking for a parking space on the street, and they're not going to go into the parking garage, possibly for security reasons. Are there precedents in which the parking structure is provided that in such a way that it gets around that issue?
Actually, one of the things that we heard in one of the comments with some of the city folks, there's a number of ways for parking garages to work better than they do now. Currently, a lot of times the facades are not very welcoming, I guess, which can be changed by having retail on the first floor. But one suggestion that someone had was actually they went out to, I believe, a parking structure in Canada somewhere and saw that on the outside it said in bright neon letters how many spaces were open at the time in the actual parking garage, so that everybody was kind of like, all right, well, 200 spaces are open. Why not park there? It was kind of an incentive to bring people in there.
What about the issue of security?
Security. One thing that Princeton, New Jersey did when they had a very bad traffic problem, and that people had to actually park on the campus of the university, or Princeton University. So they had a high core density with not enough parking there. So they put a parking garage in and designed it in such a way that there was security. There was actually someone who manned the entrance and things like that, as well as they spray painted the entire inner part of the parking garage with white paint, which made it a lot brighter. And actually, they put a certain lighting in there that was not very gloomy, I guess. And I was amazed walking through that parking garage. It actually felt somewhat nice for what it was anyway. So there's small little things you can do to make the parking garage just at least feel safe. And obviously, the more people that are in the parking garage with eyes looking around and everything, the safer the parking garage is.
There's another aspect also to parking garage design that we haven't discussed yet, which has to do with security, not just inside the garage, but on the street as well. Because of course, if you have a large block that's just parking, the street there is not a whole lot that can sort of kill the street life because you don't have any activity. And one option, one possibility is to actually put restaurants or ground floor retail on the street at the street level, and then you have parking above that, and you can then design the facade of the parking garage such that it's more attractive than parking garage necessarily needs to be.
That's the way the parking garage is in Springfield.
In Springfield, yeah. Okay. So I mean, there are a lot of precedents for that. Obviously, that's not the
some of the things that we're looking at for Main Street might change the amount of parking available. Certainly keeping lanes, but if we were to do parallel parking rather than angle parking, which is more dangerous, if angle parking is more dangerous than parallel parking, then if we certainly are conscious of how to improve those spaces elsewhere.
You can also actually fully wrap it full height, so that you have, you can put residential units up against, I believe 3 sides, but probably 2 better. I mean, less sides you do it is better, but you can get it so that the street actually has a full facade from top to bottom.
So most people don't even know there's a parking garage back there, unless you put a sign or something.
Which has its issues. So,
I should say that Scott's point raises another sort of major issue that we've been discovering over the last week, which has to do with one thing about Main Street that we actually wouldn't mind changing, and I'd like to know if you guys would think it would be a good idea, which is that even though Main Street is considered to be pretty pedestrian friendly, a lot of people have been telling us, and you observed it also, that it's the road bed itself is very, very wide, and it's actually can be a little bit daunting for a pedestrian to cross the street, even though cars are usually pretty good about stopping at the crosswalk. And what we realized in that when we actually measured the traffic lanes is that with 2 lanes in either direction, the lanes are much wider than they actually need to be, and that if we narrow the road bed, created smaller lanes, which would have the benefit of also calming traffic and making it go more slowly, we could actually, if we wanted to, double the width of the sidewalks on either side and still maintain the same traffic, and we can include bike lanes with that at the same time. So I think there's a lot of potential for rethinking the way Main Street actually functions. Yeah.
Have you been here in the winter?
Yes. And
Okay, so you know there's like a big...
pile of mountain snow. Yes, and this is
So that would have to change, obviously.
yeah, we have to figure out a way of working with that.
Yeah.
And so maybe, maybe we don't expand the sidewalks to the full 30 feet that are possible.
Or put the snow elsewhere.
Put the snow elsewhere, or there are a number of ways of dealing with
there's
it.
a medium speed.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Like Linda points out, the other option, other than just expanding the sidewalks, is you could essentially turn Main Street into a boulevard where there was a central median that was wide enough, providing sort of an island to go to as you're crossing the street, and that could be an area potentially for bike lanes. That could be where you put the snow. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Going to the winter observation, anybody who's observed the winter clearance of snow on Main Street, it maintains traffic really well. Parking is reestablished very quickly, and you do get the boulevard like and it works very well. There are certain charms to the fact you have a street that starts with 2 lanes and ends with 2 lanes, but anything can happen in between.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that was one comment I was just going to make. It would be nice if there were actual lanes on the street, which, I mean, sometimes it seems like there seem to be 3 lanes, sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 1, but there's no actual division between any of them or any real directional until you get to the light, to the light at the other end of town, which I think is a major problem.
One of the things we were talking about is how that lack of marking on lanes can make drivers actually better drivers because they have to be more conscious of each other, and instead of just having a prescribed lane that they know that they think that they know that they're safe to go fast in, when it's kind of unmarked and they're not quite so sure, it's more like walking on the sidewalk as a person, and you have to be more conscious not to bump into the people around you, and it's part of the reason that the street is more pedestrian friendly than it could be at the width that it is.
I find that hard to believe, though, given, like, I mean, if you ever come up to, like, a toll booth where there's, like, 7 toll booths, there's always people, like, crossing from here over to, like, this one because there's no, like, division. Like, I mean,
I don't know.
something like that, people cut across lanes constantly.
Yeah, I will say, not that this place is anything like it, but I lived in Argentina for a month, and those roads are crazy. They don't really have stoplights or stop signs anywhere. They don't have markings anywhere, and sometimes they'll squeeze 5 cars into a width that should be better suited for 2 or 3 cars, and it's pretty crazy. But the whole time I was there, I didn't see 1 accident, and people were extraordinary drivers. I mean, I know it's a different culture, but
does anyone know if there are studies that address this issue? Because I mean, we know from some observation anecdotally that we've seen cases where it does work, and I'm not sure what the frequency of accidents on Main Street is, although in my years of living in Northampton, I haven't really
it's, I don't know. Yeah.
So, so calming traffic on Main Street, you talked at the meeting about, traffic coming down, at the beginning of King Street, the Northampton Street, slowing people down. How about South Street, where, people come flying down Route 10, you literally go from 55 miles an hour to 35 miles an hour, and they painted lines in the road, they wave flags, they put up signs, but nothing seems to stop that short of a policeman ever present for his tickets.
Yeah, we've noticed South Street also as being a strong, and Bridge Street too. And I think the fact is that the roads are wide there and there's no substitute for just moving the curbs in. Because you can post the speed limit, however frequently you want with however big signs you want, and people will typically drive to the speed that the road is designed to accommodate, rather than what the posted limit is. And the best way to get drivers to slow down is to move to first of all bring buildings up in close to the road, and if you can't do that, then at least bring curbs and then plant trees and that sort of thing. That will slow down traffic.
Well, I think also for us, one of these proposals, and I can't remember here, discussed it at length, but it's up there. There's a section drawing of it up in the middle of those 11 by 17 drawing. The proposal to widen, to widen the sidewalks on Main Street. But this is done, and I think the intent behind this has to do more with the quality of the street life, the sidewalk, pedestrian life, than it has to do with the traffic. But it's only possible because of the tremendous, width that exists curb to curb on Main Street. And so, anyway, those are all issues. But I think that the proposal for narrowing the street has as much to do, if not more, with widening the sidewalks and making a certain quality of sidewalk life, street life on Main Street possible. That it's not being taken advantage of.
I guess I'm just curious. So we have the Village Hill, which in your view increases density significantly.
The
Village Hill.
The Village Hill.
So to the left we have what the developer is working on now, basically the West Mass plan. But to the right you substantially increase density. And we talked about how Route 66, Prince Street, whatever, comes down right into the center of camp by the library, etc. And I think people's worst fears is that traffic is going to end up on South Street. That there's, they're going to have to deal with that at some point. And the more people, the more traffic, the more compounded the problem. Everyone's going to the same place.
Sorry, show us where South Street is.
Okay, so this is South Street.
Yeah.
Coming down there.
And currently, even as we sit here, they're digging up Earl Street to the straight and bringing the traffic down to South Street.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're suggesting. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So you're suggesting your fear is that the traffic from here is going to come down here,
Right.
And go. Okay. Good. All right.
It's just, and it doesn't go there.
Where does it go?
It's not going to go through West Hampton. It's going to come down into Northampton. So there's a lot of people.
Well, why? I'm just curious. Why wouldn't it go through here? Now we've had a little bit of discussion about running, extending Route 66 across here, but it doesn't do that now. And if it came this way, if it came down here, it would go up through Main Street and out. Why would it go south?
Logs in the central town coming that way already.
I know.
Just think this is a good, you raise a really significant point, which is with all of these schemes right now, they look at max build scenarios. So this is not, we're saying must do here, saying if nor, and one answer where we're trying to get, trying to just provide some tangible expression of is if Northampton were to grow. One of the things that we've heard, one of the ongoing conversations all week is, does Northampton need to grow? One thing that we're just finding right now in the current status quo is, regardless of population, about a stagnant population, or slight decline population, it continues to grow physically. So we were looking at all these examples, this one just being one of the cases, and King Street being another, how could it accommodate the growth in that scenario? We're not necessarily advocating that we build this out. Specifically to Hospital Hill, Village Hill, we looked at how could, given all the buildings that have already gone up on the site and those that are remaining, how could we just sort of bring this into a type of urbanism that we believe is the best form of urbanism. So
Well, I would say, I mean, not only that, I mean, it's that, it's not just a matter of the best form of urbanism, but it's also our understanding of what the original intention for development of Hospital Hill was, which is that there's going to be a mixed-use, walkable neighborhood. And so I think that the proposal that Scott's talking about is one that is in keeping with that. And there's one additional factor with respect to the increased densification there is that densification will presumably support more commercial and retail, so that in the absence of commercial and retail, everyone that lives up there is going to have to drive for everything. But with the presence of more population, you can support some commercial that would at least alleviate some of those trips. Obviously, presumably people are going to be driving in and out to work. But,
yeah, well, just two quick points. One is that there are pedestrian connections from this community that could help alleviate. Hopefully, people will be riding bikes and walking, not necessarily relying upon their cars. But two, it's a great point that we'd like to sort of discuss tonight and tomorrow night is if Northampton were to grow, where we'd like to see it growth occur. So
in terms of what this gentleman is saying, in terms of Hospital Hill growing and all the cars do converge right now in that one area on, and it's Main Street, and Hospital Hill is a tremendous concern. But when you get to the other areas, say Route 66, and they're spending millions of dollars reconstructing it, and people have asked for sidewalks, and they're not putting sidewalks. I don't know if they're putting bike lanes, and as we discussed earlier, that offline is that there should be some commercial zoning. We have stores there where people don't have to go on Route 10 and pass this gentleman's house or into Main Street, where if they need milk or they want to go to the restaurant, they can do that right there. But to spend millions of dollars and rebuild 66 and not have sidewalks is really short-sighted.
And it's you're going to because you have to have enough people before you can support a store. So I mean, certainly this scheme has anticipated retail here, and we also spoke to this building here, which is a wonderful building, and that it's under renovation right now, and we're looking for a client for that. So we spoke with the person Mass Development. So that's certainly within the concept of this.
Yes.
So my understanding is that a lot of this is to decrease sprawl, and a lot of the sprawl I've seen is in Hadley, which is a lot of big box stores, and people drive to Hadley to go to these big box stores. So do you think this is going to decrease that sprawl and that commute? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess a couple ways to answer. One is that Hadley, although we're thinking about the region, to deal with all the surrounding communities, I think would be biting off more than we get to this semester. But one of the things that we've looked at, because we realized that even though big box development isn't necessarily looked on favorably by everyone, that a lot of people do patronize big box stores and use them, and that's a major amenity for a lot of people. One of the things that we've looked at is to show that if Northampton were to continue to allow the sorts of national chain retailers that typically build big boxes, if Northampton were to continue to allow those on King Street, for example, how could we do that in such a way that we still accommodated pedestrians and didn't totally exclude pedestrians from the equation in order to accommodate cars? And so this plan, for example, shows one example up at the corner there, which is where the Cole Morgan is currently, although it looks like Cole Morgan may be moving out, showing a block that would accommodate about 600,000 square feet.
The actual footprint is about 165,000.
165, yeah.
Which is pretty much standard for a big box store. That doesn't include the parking that is needed for that. So what we were trying to take a look at, the northern part of King Street, even the central part of King Street, which we haven't really talked about tonight. Let's see. So this is the big box right there, footprint that we're looking at. Retail today, this would all be in competition with the Hadleys and East Hamptons, the Holyoke's, all that type of stuff. Because a lot of people, and if you have an option for that type of store at Target or Walmart, different things like that, designed properly to fit into a neighborhood along the lines of that, that would draw everybody from Northampton. They wouldn't have to envision something like that happening up here. And another premise that we've taken for all of the development is development that's not built for the next 30 years. It's not designed just specifically for one use, just specifically for a Target, just specifically for a Walmart, that type of thing. But something that can be used minimum 100 years, that can be adapted to different uses. So if you had a footprint of, say, 45,000 square feet, which times three-story Target, at the Target, or a big box, I keep saying Target, but it's not a big Target at all, that's just random, these pop up in my head. A big box type of retail store could use 3 stories of that, and if, for example, they move out of that building, like what happens currently to a number of buildings up there. If they move out, it can be subdivided into other 1-story, 45,000 square foot uses and possibly mixed use, all kinds of stuff, as well as accommodating parking for those uses as well. So we're trying to think long term, what types of building types could fit in there instead of just one specific building type, as well as a mix of uses between, so we were looking at the big box here. The reason we put it at that end is because of the traffic generated by 91 and Damon Road coming in, but also because there's an affordable housing area right behind it. We figured it would make sense to put that type of commercial use close to the people who are more than likely going to use it, as opposed to putting it, say, down here, which is quite a hike for them. And in this scheme, we had a higher density center in the middle of King Street from up here down to Main Street, taking a look at an access from northeast into Northampton, mainly because this road along here, Bridge Street, it wants to be more of a residential road, neighborhood road, and so, and you have Damon Road coming in here, Bridge Street coming in here. You really want, for traffic flow, something coming in right through here. Obviously, you have the railroad track, which is an issue on that side, which could be accommodated. Currently, that's where the bike path is right now, which obviously is an issue. We would not eliminate that by any means, but encourage some way to design the street to accommodate that as well. There's probably not going to be too much development along there because there's wetlands here and here, so the street wouldn't have to be too wide, and you wouldn't have buildings taking up the place of bike lanes and things such as that. But then from these centers, this would be a center, and then down to the historic center, Main Street, would be a mix of densities of both commercial and residential. It'd be a higher density and then work down to a lower density neighborhood and then back up to a higher density, which is typical of many traditional, the way traditional cities have run in the past. So that's kind of what at least Aaron and I were thinking for that area. And obviously that would have ramifications both in this neighborhood and possibly the industrial area, which we started to take a look at early. We just kind of, again, right out of the counter, but also there's a lot of complex issues with the industrial park.
You have a question?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, speaking as someone who owns property on Market Street, first of all, it seems like a great idea, because there's always people like trying to beat the traffic going down Market between King and Main Street, so it would be great to route that direction. But what I'm really wondering is, do you think that you'll run into problems with big box stores that want to occupy that space? They basically have certain plans that they've developed for their whole line. You know, will they be willing to fit into that sort of thing? They have a lot of power, obviously, financially, coming into the community, bring a lot of jobs and tax and support on
Yeah,
that.
there's definitely a lot of economic incentives, which is pretty much why they come in. Most towns, the only reason they look at the plans, they say, I don't really like the plans, but we love the tax revenue that you guys are bringing in. But there are, I mean, short term, yeah, they all have their standard plans and everything, but those are always constantly changing. The fact that Walmart is looking at a 2-story building is just even mind-boggling to some people.
There are plenty of examples. The thing is, where basically it's sort of water flows to water flows downhill. So communities where there's no resistance, generic plan would be, but places that have some level of design requirements and that are sort of informed consumer, informed community, they certainly will conform to that. And there was a multi-story Home Depot that went into Portland. There's plenty of examples of multi-story Targets in Brooklyn, and also in communities that aren't nearly as dense. And if you look at Mashpee Commons, which is on the other side of the state, they, for example, have gotten CVS, which isn't quite a big box, but to conform to urban standards. And certainly, if you provide the setting for them, and they go over it, and they want to come to the community, and there's a venue for them.
And there actually is an urban precedent for the big box kind of retail. It's called a department store.
So obviously, it would take a little bit of a while to change the mindset of most developers who tend to go to take the easier route initially. But if forced otherwise, they will definitely consider it.
Also, the functional land cost, though, and it's just to follow up what Josh was saying. In Florida, for example, and I raised this point the other night, Publix, which is essentially the grocery store in the state of Florida, because land is so expensive, they now will not build single-story grocery stores. Everything above it, they have to build condos or something above it to help they expend the cost of building a grocery store.
To build on that, we were given a number which could be plus or minus $1 million an acre down there. And when Aaron and I took a look at the residential portion just alone, for this block here, this area, which is approximately 4 acres, I think, this street and this street, sorry, this area here, there's about 4 acres. We got 20 units on there, which for 4 acres, the land cost divided by the acreage per unit ended up being about $200,000 for 1 unit in that little area, which is obviously expensive. So just land alone, $200,000 for 5 units an acre. So we look next to that, we put about 18 units on 2 acres, which is about 9 units an acre, which dropped the land cost to about $100,000, which is more affordable and things such as that. And that's just strictly residential on that site. So when you're looking at certain areas along here, which you can accommodate office, retail, commercial, and possibly residential units all on that, you get more for your money, basically.
I think one of the other things we want to demonstrate with that little development there is that when we talk about density and that is rightfully, I think, worrying to a lot of people. What we wanted to show here is that you can do this kind of density, and it's actually very similar to the kind of density that already exists in a lot of Northampton. In fact, in a lot of Northampton's most desirable neighborhoods. For example, these neighborhoods off of South Street, neighborhoods off of Elm Street. If you look at the actual, if you look at the plan and you look at the pattern, the way the houses are laid out, we've tried to basically emulate it up there, and so that you can see that it is possible to sort of recreate that kind of neighborhood if that's what people would like to see. Yeah.
So people want to live between the railroad tracks and King Street?
If we made King Street like that, maybe they would. That's the hope. I don't know.
There's one example of this is off of Center Street in Pittsburgh, for example, where they had the East Busway and the train tracks went through. It was vacant industrial land. They went back in and put a Whole Foods. There was a track store, there was several stores and some mixed-use housing in between to fill that. And it's almost very similar dimensions. Just one of the examples.
I was wondering for those housing units, where would the green areas of those folks?
Right. Well, there's first of all, this is the marsh here where the beavers live. That's about a 3-minute walk from most of those residential units there, which is really not dissimilar from someone living here on Elm Street and having the Mill River about a 3-minute walk away. So the idea is that they might not necessarily have a giant farm field in their backyard, but it's easy to get to a place where there is park and green space and that sort of thing, just like there is in a lot of other neighborhoods.
Well, and certainly in these areas that are immediately off of, because you recognize, it may be hard to see, but the way that this is organized is that the buildings that front King Street, the block, it's actually a street and alley system, so the blocks are turned so that these buildings front King Street, but these buildings front
So it would be real easy to have those units in there connected up with there. Have a bike path run to the back of those units as well.
Yeah,
so
actually,
they connect up with that bike path and one that's running out before.
actually, you probably can't see from the back of the room, but we've dotted in red here potential place for the bike for bike path and bike lanes at least, and that's exactly what we'd like to do is have it come up here and then connect in there and then extend all the way.
Yeah, I think it's already planned to do that connection there. That connection goes to the
That makes complete sense. Yeah.
So I'm assuming you're dealing with a lot of different property owners in this plan. How do you get this to work, or how have other cities effectively got this to work?
Right.
With those property owners?
That's a great question. I think the answer is to say that this is not something that we think could be implemented tomorrow or this year, but it's an ideal and it's sort of a goal to work for. And what we're hoping is that by creating this sort of plan, that that it could happen incrementally with a number of different people sort of working collectively towards the same goal with an idea of what the ultimate end is.
I think just to build on what Aaron was saying, that these plans, this is sort of the connection between those plans and diagram work such as this, which is part of the end goal for this semester, to come up with a form-based code that would, each of these the transit zones, for example, have a list of permissible building types and how buildings are cited in the lots, and all those attributes are included. And we would use this design to inform a code that would work in order that, for example, would start to underlay the regulatory process such that if development were to occur on a site like that, it could happen that way. Now, that's a whole can of worms as far as form-based codes, but it's to say that those, when they've been enacted in lots of communities. City of Miami, City of Milwaukee, lots of cities have sort of adopted this as their smaller towns. That when that's adopted, it can be adopted as a parallel ordinance to the existing ordinance. And developers, for example, if they wanted to do this according to form-based code, they can do it by right. But as all to say, what we're doing is an academic charrette, and we're doing this to nothing that we will have.
Yeah, but let me just point something out. If we're looking at the property here, these are relative. This is King Street right here. Right? This is the railroad. Tracks right here. So here's King, and these are sizable parcels of land. So I actually don't think that the proposals for development along here are necessarily. I mean, I haven't looked at it closely, so I don't know. I don't know if they were meticulous about looking at the property lines, but essentially they're taking fairly large parcels like this right there. And that's a large parcel. You take that parcel, and you've got plenty of room to do a development like that. And so what it entails is, I mean, it'd be much harder if you had 20 parcels that you had to accumulate for one purpose, rather than having one parcel that you're going to subdivide for 20 different homes.
And I was just wondering, how do you get it to happen there in the big town of a lot of property owners?
Sorry, how do you get it to?
To happen there in the town of a lot of property owners rather than in 20 different places.
Oh, I think it would have to do with establishing some vision of what the street is intended to be, and somebody starting it, and there being kind of common understanding that if you purchase property there and develop it, you can have certain confidence. I mean, because you're going to be required to develop it in a certain way, but you also have a certain confidence that everyone else who buys on that street is going to have to develop in a certain kind of way.
What effect ultimately would this have on, like, if this were ultimately sort of implemented or started to be implemented, what effect would this have on the population of the town?
Yeah, no, that's a key question, and I think that our assumption is that, at least the assumption of this drawing here is that it would significantly, and we don't have a number to match, but it would significantly increase the population of the town.
Yeah, I started numbers-wise, very rough number. Between affordable housing units, SROs, mixed-use mid-rise condos, and some of the townhomes, stacked townhomes, just a wide range of density.
And
single-family houses. I was looking at around 650 units. One bedroom, southwest of there, that whole entire area is 700 units. So, yeah, it is higher density.
There's another way of looking at it, though, which is that in order for any of what we're proposing to happen, there has to be a market for there to be people there who want to buy the properties. So if it's not, so if this doesn't happen, but there's still a market there, then the units will get built somewhere. And so one way to look at this is to say that if people are moving to town, if the population is increasing, this is how it can do so in a way that's not detrimental to the community. So that we don't know if it'll happen or not. But if it does happen, we want it to happen in a good way, not a bad way. So that's what we're planning for here.
Well, the assumption is too that any increased population that lives there, that they are moving into an environment where they don't need a car for as many things as they would otherwise need a car for. But they're within a 5-minute walk of significant commercial activity. That there is a range of units, so that one would hope that it would be housing that would be afforded by people who not only upper level executives but also their secretaries, teachers, and police and fire department personnel, people who work in restaurants. So anyway, that's the thought that it also has a boost for the city's tax base. It comes from residential and commercial real estate.
One of the ideas which makes sense, these smaller units, you wouldn't have that many children, that's cheaper.
Yeah.
What was retirees and not just elderly, but middle age and so on, taxes would basically increase, but your expenses wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to make a recommendation that you not have housing for children, for families with children. But you're right that it seems from all the conversations we've had, there seems to be some significant demographic for retirees and for single persons and for couples with children. So some mix of those things, the city should be able to benefit financially from these taxes.
Part of these people would be maybe getting more education and life education stuff that comes from colleges. Sure. It's already an education center for 5 universities.
Right.
That continues to be one of the things.
Right. Yes.
In terms of pedestrian
Can you
access,
speak up?
in terms of pedestrian access to King Street, what for this plan? What would you guess is a proposed width of the sidewalk, and is there a standard amount of feet for crosswalks across King Street?
I think today Dan and I rode out there and actually looked at how wide just the traffic lanes were. The traffic lanes width were 2 lanes one way, 2 lanes the other way. From curb to curb is about 50 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in certain towns, you can accommodate that same amount of traffic at about 40. And that was actually not with parking on either side. There's no parking at all, 50 feet wide. How wide is Main Street?
Main Street's 130 feet, and one of the things that we have there, the sidewalks right now are at 15 feet, and some of our schemes propose the sidewalks going out to 30 feet with, so you could have sidewalk cafes and accommodate bike lanes. And I think that anything that would be proposed in King Street would be certainly of that character, where you have at least 12 feet of sidewalks that would incorporate.
Actually, for not for this scheme, but for another scheme we're working on for King Street, Dan drew one of these street sections, and if you aren't familiar with the street section, it's kind of like slicing through a green pepper, and you see the walls. And so you have the buildings on the sides here, and then you have the street and the sidewalks and whatever there's parking lots in this one, whatever's on the ground at the bottom. So you can kind of see the space that's formed by the buildings in the street. And so up here you have the existing condition of King Street, and I believe the road width is around 60 feet here. Then you have these massive parking lots and then these little buildings, and you can see that the cars will go really fast and you don't really feel enclosed in a nice space. And what we would propose in both of the schemes is get about 15 feet of sidewalks in and still get a bike lane and trees and 4 lanes of traffic in here. And it's to be a really pleasant street with this really great feeling of enclosure.
But it's so beautiful now.
Yeah, one thing we noticed when we went out there, there's a sign that says State Highway ends here, and it still looked like the state highway. I knew it was the sign told you.
I just wanted to explain, we just posted this diagram up here because we wanted to make a point about what we were talking about a minute ago about growth and how to accommodate growth. This is just a very quick historical analysis of how Northampton has grown from about 1800 to the present. And what you can see is that Northampton has grown, of course, in the past, but it's always, but for most of its history, it grew in a particular way, which was the kind of sort of dense mixed-use walkable neighborhoods that we're advocating and proposing for Northampton as a way of going again. From 1800 to 1850, the population in Northampton tripled from about 2,000 to 6,000. And so there's sort of a corresponding growth, but it stays within these dense centers. And then from 1850 to 1900, the population tripled again from 6,000 to 18,000. And again, you can see there's sort of comparable level of expansion of the footprint. And the interesting thing to note is that it's sort of in each of these new centers starts. So here is just downtown Northampton. Here Florence gets founded, and the Florence of 1850 is sort of similar to the downtown Northampton of 1800. And then in 1900 you have the center of Leeds, of course, these are generated by the economy and industry and so forth. But as new neighborhoods are required, they always, in the past, have grown with these sort of very, very dense footprints because out of necessity, essentially. They didn't have cars, so they couldn't drive out in the countryside to live. Same thing happens in 1950. The population goes up to 26,000, and there's still relatively little increase of area. From 1950 to 2008, the population has gone from 26,000 to 28,000, which is actually not very much growth at all compared to, proportionally. That's not very much at all. And yet, look at the increase of footprint here. It's just the whole area is now sort of permeated with human development. So, we wanted to make the point that both Northampton has grown in the past, so it's not unrealistic to think that it's likely to grow in the future, but that it doesn't have to grow in the way that it has grown in the last 50 years, which has really been enabled and sort of generated by automobile traffic, often at the expense of pedestrian traffic. So,
it's now 9 o'clock. We take one more question if you have one, but it's 9 o'clock, so we can end it here. We're making our final presentation for the charrette tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock at the Senior Center on Con Street. I think the doors are going to open at 3:30, and our intention is to have the drawings up around the room, displayed in some way for people to look at. If you want to come early, look at it. There'll be a presentation and then a discussion afterwards, and it all should run until about 6 o'clock tomorrow. So thank you very much for your interest and your questions and your comments and your presence here with us, and hope you can join us tomorrow evening. I say that too for your presence and comments and suggestions over the entire week, but especially this evening and